We need to consider realms of authority when we consider Romans 13. Let's see if we can apply Romans 13 to the real world. As you know, the first several verses, 1 through 7, discuss the issue of submission to the government. What does that look like, especially when in Acts chapter 2 and 4, and in the book of Daniel, and the story of Rahab, and the Apostle Paul sometimes fleeing persecution? How do we put all of this together when we see, courtesy of other parts of the Bible, that there are times when the Christian has to say to the government, sorry, can't do it. Would love to be able to accommodate it. Why would we talk like that? Because we want to be respectful, but my supreme authority is the Lord, and I've got to do what he tells me to do. And if you tell me otherwise, well, I'm sorry, he wins. Knowing that, Romans 13 also tells us you got to be ready for the consequence. And this is a perfect example of how to put this entire thing together. Received an email from a brother up in Canada stating, Friel, you mentioned that you don't think there's any more church restrictions in Canada. He said there absolutely are. This particular church is in Alberta, and he sent to me, which I hold in my never-before nicotine-stained fingers, the new rules from the Alberta government. Here they are. Capacity limited to 1/3 fire code occupancy. Masks are mandatory. 2 mattresses. What's a mattress? I don't know this. I'm just confused about what a mattress is. 2 mattresses of physical distancing between households or too close contacts for those living alone. Okay. Obey or not to obey? That is the question. We need to consider realms of authority when we consider Romans 13. The government has a realm of authority, but it's limited. The family has a realm of authority. It too is limited. Furthermore, the church has a realm of authority. It's limited also. We can't just crash into everybody's business, telling them what to do. That's what Pharisees do. We're gospel preachers. And we can also preach prophetically, not that we predict the future, but prophetically against, hey, realm, that's sinful. Repent of that. Stop that. This is what God says about your behavior. We do that, should do that, all day, every day. That's the role of the church. Now, the question is, when they intersect, do you have to obey? If you recall, from a new Presbyterian friend of mine, Pastor Noah Bailey at First Reformed Presbyterian Church of Cambridge, something like that. It's really long title. Super cool building, by the way. I mean, wow, is it old? A couple hundred years old. Just an amazing church. And he's a really, really smart local preacher. We have many of those out there, I'm pleased to say. And he used some words that helped me to refine the difference between physical and spiritual. Those are the words that I've been using. If it's spiritual, the government can't tell you what to do. They can't say your liturgy needs to be done in this order. No. Your confession needs to go there. Or no, you can't say that you can't have any prayers for the government. Sorry. We obey God. You don't have any authority in the spiritual realm. However, we do let them have authority in the physical realm. Building, codes, plumbing, etc. We do what we're told, and we really don't have any qualms about that. Even though you could argue, and I think persuasively, that's really none of their beeswax. It's not really their job description given by God. But they're in authority, so we try to do what we're told, a la Romans 13. And most people, so far historically, in America, have not been concerned about those things. Sometimes they can be onerous, and sometimes they can be expensive. You've got to do things that maybe you wouldn't be inclined to do to make your facility up to code, but you do them. And you probably don't think, I have the right to disobey. because they're being tyrannical. You probably wouldn't do that. I've never seen anybody doing that. But now we've got a new bag of issues. And the government is indeed stepping into the church realm in unique ways. So we need to take a look at those ways and ask, when do we submit and when don't we? I used physical and spiritual. Pastor Noah, he used essential. The elements of worship that are essential. The regulative principle applied. Worship, preaching, praying, ordinances, fellowshipping. That's God commands that. This is how I want worship to be done. And if the government steps into that, in any way, shape, or form, we have the right to say, can't accommodate that request because God says otherwise. But then Pastor Noah used a different word, circumstantial. The circumstances around your worship. What if the government came in and said, your pews are too high. They need to be lowered for everybody to sit in them, or vice versa. What would you do? Well, you'd probably obey that because, well, there's maybe ADA things to consider. So sure, we'll do that. But they're asking more these days. And in Alberta, that seems to be the case. When you get together for worship, they're limiting the number of people who can be there. Masks are mandatory. You've got to have 2 meters, so probably 6 feet between you. All right, question. Are those commands from the government physical or spiritual? Are they essential or circumstantial? Please note, most likely with this particular list, you are going to have different churches with different responses. It is almost a certainty. And we've got to be really slow to not make our local church conviction somebody else's local church conviction, because these are rather tricky areas. For instance, capacity limited to 1/3, fire code occupancy. Okay, why? Has nothing to do with fire code. It's just the measurement that they're using to tell you you've got to limit the number of people who attend your service. Some churches are going to go, no problemo, we will have 2 services or 3 or whatever. And there's been churches that do that. However, there's going to be some churches that would say, no, the body gets together. We do communion. These most likely would be churches who would never do 2 services because they think that divides the body. Your church may not have that conviction, but they do. And they are going to say, well, we can't do multiple services. Therefore, we cannot obey this command to limit our occupancy to 1/3. We can't do it. This is, I think, a fair application of Romans 13 along with Acts 2 and 4, etc., that churches can make. On the other hand, I think some churches are going to accommodate it. Masks. What about the government says for you to worship, you've got to put on a mask. Well, this is a physical thing, isn't it? Yes, definitely that, because they're asking you to adorn your body with a diaper on your face. However, we've got to ask the question, is it a spiritual issue? Some churches are going to say, no, I don't think so. Other churches are going to say, yeah, we greet each other warmly. We see each other, and we're not going to muffle our praise by putting something over our mouths, particularly that we don't think are all that effective anyway. In other words, we're going to see a different application of the very same verses, but done differently by individual churches. And we need to wrestle through them in our own local churches without getting ticked at everybody who makes a different decision, and using essential versus circumstantial, physical versus spiritual to help guide us through having the Romans 13 rubber meet the road. This is Wretched Radio. If you would like to see the entire episode of the snippet you're watching and perhaps check out my piano chops, simply visit wretched.org. Good evening, my fellow totally depraved Americans.